All right. Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to be diving deep into supply chains.
Really excited to be here.
Yeah, our listeners are always looking for ways to make their supply chain stronger, more resilient. And we found this great episode of Supply Chain Talks that really gets into some really interesting strategies.
Yeah, there's so much to think about these days.
So just to kind of recap a little, we've already talked about CRM systems.
Right.
How they can really boost efficiency and communication. But this episode really digs into some, I guess you could say, more advanced tactics.
Yeah.
So one of the things they really emphasized was integrated operations planning, or IOP.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to say, this sounds like it's really all about syncing up everything. Your inventory, predicting what's going to sell like hotcakes, and making sure all your suppliers are on the same page. Like, how do you actually make that happen?
Well, it's really about connecting all the different parts of your business, right? It's like, imagine an orchestra. You got all these different sections. They all got to be in sync to make the music work. Same with your business. You got sales, production, procurement. They all need to be working together. And that's where this thing they call S&OP comes in, sales and operations planning.
Yeah. So it's not just like one big meeting and then everybody goes their separate ways. This is like a constant process,
Yep,
right?
Absolutely. It's about having a structured process where these teams come together regularly, forecast demand, plan production, and make sure everyone's on the same page.
Makes sense.
And it's not just about meetings. It's about using data to make these decisions. Walmart, for example, they use really sophisticated software to coordinate inventory across all their different departments. So This software, it's pretty cool. It analyzes all their sales data, from the past. It looks at current trends and even things like the weather to try and predict what people are going to buy. So that way they can, try to minimize running out of stuff and avoid having too much stuff sitting around, which can, end up costing them money.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody wants a warehouse full of stuff that nobody's buying.
Exactly.
And that level of prediction is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And actually, it reminds me of something else the episode mentioned. It was about how Procter & Gamble, the big guys, they use something called demand sensing technology.
Yeah.
What is that exactly?
So demand sensing technology, it's kind of like taking forecasting to a whole other level. It uses real-time data from all sorts of places, like what's selling in stores, what people are talking about online, even the weather forecast, to get a really accurate picture of what people want.
Mm-hmm.
And they use, fancy algorithms and AI to analyze all this data and find patterns that, honestly, humans would probably miss.
So it's not just looking at what happened in the past, but it's actually trying to predict the future.
Yeah, that's the idea.
That's pretty wild.
It is.
They also talked a lot about Amazon in the episode and how they do real-time inventory optimization. It seems like a lot of these strategies, it's all about speed.
Oh, absolutely. You got to be able to adapt quickly these days.
You snooze, you lose, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And Amazon, they're like the masters of this. They have systems that are constantly checking their inventory levels, and they're adjusting prices, running promotions, even changing how they ship things all the time to make sure they're running as efficiently as possible.
Wow. So it's like they have this mission control center where they're just watching everything and making changes on the fly.
They got it.
It's pretty impressive. But even with all the best tech in the world, you still got to have good relationships with the people who are actually making your stuff, right?
You're absolutely right. You can't just rely on algorithms. Supplier collaboration is key. Look at Apple, for instance. They don't just send out orders and wait. They actually share their sales projections with their suppliers so that the suppliers can get ready and make sure they have enough parts to meet the demand.
Makes sense.
It helps prevent delays and keeps things running smoothly.
Yeah. Okay, so integrated planning, that helps you optimize things internally, and it helps you build those strong relationships with your suppliers.
Right.
But what about all the stuff that happens outside your control, natural disasters, political instability, all that crazy stuff going on in the world? That's where this idea of diversified sourcing comes in, right?
You nailed it. If you're only getting your materials or products from one supplier, you're putting all your eggs in one basket. And that can be really risky.
Makes sense.
Diversified sourcing is basically spreading out that risk by having multiple suppliers, ideally in different parts of the world. So if something happens in one place, your whole business doesn't go down the drain.
Yeah, it sounds simple in theory.
It does.
But I imagine it's got to be pretty complicated to manage all those different suppliers.
It definitely can be.
I mean, you got to vet them, make sure they can deliver the quality you need, and keep everyone communicating clearly. That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, you need a good system for managing those relationships. And remember what happened with Boeing and the Dreamliner.
Uh-oh.
They had some serious trouble coordinating with all their different suppliers. It caused delays, cost overruns, the whole 9 yards.
Not good.
Not good at all.
Yeah, that's a good reminder that even a good idea can go wrong if it's not managed carefully.
Yeah.
But supply chain talks, they gave a really good example of how this can work. They talked about Apple and how they were able to weather that global chip shortage better than a lot of other companies because they weren't relying on just one supplier.
Yeah, exactly. They had multiple options, so they weren't completely stuck.
That's smart.
So.
And what about Walmart?
Well, they use diversified sourcing to get the best prices. They have multiple suppliers competing for their business, which helps keep costs down.
Yeah, gotta love a good bargain.
Right.
And I guess it also opens up opportunities to find new, maybe even better suppliers.
Oh, definitely.
It's not just about avoiding risk. It's about exploring new possibilities.
Exactly. It's kind of like, diversifying your investment portfolio, but for your supply chain.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
And, another example they talked about was Toyota after the tsunami in Japan back in 2011.
Oh, right.
That really messed up their supply chain. And it was a wake-up call for a lot of companies.
Yeah, it really showed how important it is to not depend too much on one place or one supplier, especially with all the, the uncertainty in the world these days.
Yeah. So we talked about integrated planning and diversified sourcing. And it seems like both of these strategies, they require a lot of planning, careful execution, and you got to keep managing them over time. It's not just a one and done kind of thing.
Absolutely not. It's an ongoing process.
What works for one company might not work for another, right?
Definitely. You got to figure out what makes sense for your business, what risks you're comfortable with, and what you're trying to achieve in the long run.
What's really interesting is how these strategies, they kind of work together, like integrated planning. That can help you figure out where your supply chain might be vulnerable. And then diversified sourcing, well, that gives you options if something does go wrong.
Yeah, they complement each other. It's about looking at your whole supply chain and figuring out a strategy that works for you.
That makes sense. So for everyone listening out there, think about your own supply chain. Where are the weak spots? Could better planning or having more suppliers make a difference? Maybe it's time to look beyond the usual suspects and see what else is out there.
Exactly. And remember, building a resilient supply chain, it's a journey. It's not a destination.
A marathon, not a sprint.
You got it. You got to be constantly learning, adapting, and be open to new ideas and new ways of doing things.
Well said.
Thanks.
And that's it for today's deep dive. We'll be back next time with more insights to help you optimize your business.
Looking forward to it.
See you then.